So do this for me, Mark, if you would. This is a question that just occurred to me as you were saying some of that. So you found infinite banking in your 60s. You'll come across this, you already have. I have as well. Folks are turned on to this idea, like you and I were, and they'll say, but I this with my health, but I that with my background, but I this with, so different things. So just if you would, speak to that particular person who is turned on to this idea and they're considering it, they're vetting it, they're reading the book or they're listening to us. What would you say to somebody who's wondering, am I showing up too late to the party?
Yeah, and that's a really valid point because I feel like I came into it like that for sure, already discounting a little bit. The guy I'm meeting with tonight has already told me, he said, I think I'm too old for this. I said, well, let's just have a conversation. Well, one of the things that helped me with that, and I explained to people, is yes, because it's a whole lot product, you might feel that way. But the truth is, the only thing that's going to change is you may get a little bit less death benefit, okay, on your policy. You might get less insurance coverage, but when it comes to your cash deposits, they're going to grow basically the same. Okay, so it allows them to come in and see, hey, I can still make this a bank for me. Okay, would it have been great to start it, 20 years ago? Yeah, you would have got more death benefit and you've had more time for your money to grow, but the basic principle is still the same. Okay, you're putting money in an account that is going to grow over time, no different than anywhere else. All we're asking people to do is put their money first somewhere different than they're used to. That's making the wheel more round. They just don't know it yet. So that's a challenge. Now, I'll say for me personally, I don't mind sharing, I am actually uninsurable. Okay, so I haven't been able to take one out on myself. And my wife is the same way. We're both uninsurable. We have life insurance from prior days, but we weren't able to take advantage of IBC. So we are in the process. My son's already doing it, and we're fixing to put it on grandkids, things like that. So there are ways to get around, if you will. That's kind of a broad term, not in a negative way, but to use infinite banking and apply that principle to you without it being you as the primary insured. So that's one of the things I would bring out for people that are just not comfortable with their age and particularly their situation, like me.
I love that because you covered a multifaceted response that someone, say, from that age group could come up with, because they could say, well, I'm uninsurable. And there you are saying, well, and Nash says it in the book. Nelson has a chapter, it's short, but it's in the book on what if you're uninsurable, because that can happen. Now, it's not even just from age. You could be uninsurable because of a driving issue, a driving history issue. It could be uninsurable because of a criminal background or because of different medical, whatever. But at the end of the day, yeah, a policy is a piece of private property. And that policy doesn't have to be on you as the insured, but you could still own the policy. I own policies on my 3 children, and you're building out a multi-generational family banking system, which I love, even though you're personally uninsurable. Can't have the policy on yourself. Doesn't mean that you can't own a policy. And then the other aspect, the money aspect, the same people that would wonder, and it's a perfectly logical question. Hey, I wonder, I'm in my 60s, I'm in my 70s, I'm in whatever. Is this still good for me? These same people are still going to buy stuff. These same people are still going to use money. These same people are still going to be going to banks and giving all of our money to banks and doing business with banks and bleeding out interest dollars to banks when, like you said, we could just change that one thing. We could change where some, in the beginning, it would just be some of your money. What if some of the money could go to a private banking entity first? And then you just, when you catch on to this idea, you're just thinking, hey, how can I strategically and systematically get more and more of that direct deposit that used to go to a commercial bank, right? Get more and more of that to go to this private banking system because we're all going to go to the grocery store. We want to take vacations. We're going to pay taxes. We're going to run businesses. We're going to run our households and all those normal things. So awesome. I love it. You gave a multifaceted answer to that age group that applies to everybody. What if I'm uninsurable? What about, because the money, it's about you being your own banker, right? I say often, if a 20-year-old and a 40-year-old and a 60-year-old go to get insurance, they will get different death benefits, period. Everybody knows that. But here's the thing, and you've talked about a paradigm shift. Here's the paradigm shift. That same 20-year-old, 40-year-old, and 60-year-old, if they go into a grocery store and they're all spending $100, they're getting the same amount of groceries. So the money, we're focusing on the cash value that you could be building, the capital that you could be building for yourself. Man, that's so good. I love it. I'm glad that one occurred to me. And I think that's the beautiful thing about capturing conversations like this as soon as can be done. Mark, even though this is just our second time talking to each other one-on-one, we've been part of a group for half of a year or so. But that's so valuable. That one thing I think is a very impactful thing to folks. Awesome. So the smoke and mirrors. Something else back when you were talking in that area of our conversation was about IULs. And I don't mind having that conversation. I actually it'll be released soon. I have a myths, mysteries, and misconceptions series that I cover on my channel where I'm addressing some of these things that other folks would say, well, that's the smoke and mirror of whole life insurance, or that's the thing that's too good to be true about whole life insurance or infinite banking. You can't do that with you can't do that with whole life. Infinite banking is this. So I actually recently addressed IULs particularly on that series. I'm excited to release that. And that's an important thing to bring up because lots of the folks that are using the words infinite banking are not necessarily doing what Nelson, the guy that came up with the idea, the guy that discovered it, codified it, he used whole life insurance. He didn't own universal life insurance of any kind. He owned whole life insurance and he used whole life insurance. And I'm the same way. I own multiple policies from multiple companies. They're whole life policies because I wanted to do infinite banking. So I guess, is there anything that you would say or share around that subject of, people that are listening to this conversation, they're going to keep learning and they're going to be exposed to the algorithm if they're doing anything online, right? So what would be your encouragement to people that are vetting this concept for themselves? And let me add one more thing, because you're actively reaching out to people, you're actively helping people in this space. Say this, because I'm from a small town, just like you're from a small town. Say this just like you would to somebody in your town that's not keeping their money in their family yet, but also say it in a way to where somebody that is seeing you and you don't know them, right? But they see this interview that we're having right now. What would you encourage them to do?
Well, my first encouragement would be to read, study, listen to podcasts. Now, the caveat there is all podcasts, all information, even all books are not created equal. So that's hard to discern if you're brand new into the deal. Thanks for reaching out to me or to Jesse or whomever you have initially reached out to find that. But always go back to the source, which I would say the source is Nelson Nash's book. Okay, so if you find things that are way out of kilter or somebody that is not saying whole life is the way to go. I know a lot of people that promote IUL, for example, Index Universal Life. And while, that's a product that's out there, it's sometimes promoted in a way that is not the full truth, not realistic, if you will. I even had one agent say, oh, it's just a faux IBC. And we had that conversation like, no, it's not IBC at all. It's not even a faux IBC. And the main difference is the guarantees. Okay. If you look on an IUL illustration or even contract, you'll see that at some point in there, if they don't pay what they are, quote, projecting, that policy will lapse, or in other words, just go away, unless you want to put a ton more money in there. So let's say you had borrowed, okay, from the insurance company to practice, quote, IBC with your IUL, and then you find out that capital needs more capital to just stay intact because there's no guarantees. So one of the premises, and that's what doesn't make that, to me, smoke and mirrors. And that's what I like about the IBC concept as Nelson Nash presented it. In fact, when he did it originally, he didn't even have advanced whole life concepts. He was using regular whole life. We have more advanced policies now that can help accumulate your cash value faster than even he was able to. So the key is the guarantee. Okay. And so we have to keep that in mind. Now, you may want to do an IUL, just don't call it infinite banking. Okay. That's the key there. So I'm not going to sit here and badmouth them, but I'm not going to say that they are guaranteed, because they are not.
Right. I've got a very similar stance, or maybe the same. I don't know. We're just starting in on this subject, but I don't care what people buy if it's what they want to buy. Right? Who am I to tell somebody what to buy or what to own? Do what you want to do. I would say that when you get to comparing which you think would be more ideal, that it seems very apparent to me that a universal policy contract doesn't have the same advantages and is more fragile of a structure than a whole life is. And again, yeah, it hinges on those guarantees that you have, a guaranteed level premium that won't change from the insurance company for you. That's a contract that that's a stipulation of your contract with a whole life policy. The insurance company's not going to change what that premium is. Can't do it. Couldn't if they wanted to. But you still have that same flexibility that we were talking about earlier. Hey, you've got this farmer, payday came, they got a lot of capital that they need to fit in. We want the flexibility to be able to pay more into our policy. But from the insurance company, it's not them telling us, oh, if you actually want to keep this because you're 60 now, you're 70 now, you're 80 now, you're 100 now, you actually have to pay more this year if you want to keep this contract. Doesn't happen. So, yeah. We could do the deep dive there, and I'm here for it. You just tell me. But it's a more robust, it's a more stable. The guaranteed is the word. It's a guaranteed contract when it comes to things that Universal just doesn't do. The client, the consumer, is who would be keeping risk instead of offsetting certain risks to the insurance company, like you could do with whole life insurance. Beautiful. You guys are building out this family system. Your son and his wife are doing IBC, running their business. I love it. You're looking now at the policies on the grandchildren. I can get real excited about those types of conversations. Legacy. I say it often around here. I want people to be able to live and leave a lasting legacy. I want them to live out this new paradigm of being their own banker, but it also is creating a living legacy at the same time, and one that'll last. So I definitely look forward to more conversations in the future, especially as we talk about building out a privatized family banking system. I loved what you said about the Maya TED Talk. I looked it up. I listened to it, that most advanced yet acceptable. And I think that's IBC. Again, I feel like I said something close to that earlier, that, infinite banking is just you being your own banker. That's very acceptable. Oh, instead of doing business with banks, I could be my own banker. That's such a simple thing. Beautiful, wonderful. But is that an advancing? Yeah, because nobody's doing it until they, read this book or talk with Mark from Texas or. So, boy, is that advanced? Yeah, because your knee-jerk reaction is you can't be your own banker. And I'll throw out some honor. I believe in giving honor where honor's due. I'm like you. I really appreciate the Nelson Nash Institute. I listened to something just this week. Carlos Lara is on there talking having a conversation with David Stearns about his first meeting Nelson and how that went. And it's really cool. So I would encourage everybody, check out everything that you can right from the Nelson Nash Institute, especially stuff that they're putting out about with Nelson himself or folks who personally knew him. I didn't get to personally know him, Mark, and I'm guessing that you didn't either. He wouldn't have been at the think tank that you, right, he wouldn't have been at the think tank that you went to. So we didn't have that opportunity. So I think it's really cool when we can hear from folks that did personally know him and the content that they're putting out about him. But that's what Carlos said was, he heard about this. He saw that book. He just read the title and he said, well, you can't do that, which is just a really neat thing. So here you are. You've implemented the concept for some years now. You're a professional in the space. Coming in on this conversation, was there anything that you knew you would want to either share with me? I don't mind being selfish here. I love gleaning from your experience and getting inside your mind and hearing about, what you thought about and what you did. But was there anything that you knew that you would want to either share with me or anybody that's going to have the opportunity to listen to this conversation?
That's a good question, and I've enjoyed our conversations prior and especially the one today. Your thoughtful questions are really mean a lot to me. You put a lot of thought into everything you do. So I say all this with that in mind, trying to be thoughtful. And one of the things that I'm really starting to see is we have to identify with them, not for them, but with them. So there's a level of empathy involved. That's why I think that I'm love working with farmers, ranchers, small businesses, entrepreneurs, because that's been my journey all my life. And so that has allowed me a certain level of empathy or maybe understanding where, with guys I work with, I don't have to practice my jargon control. When I say something that they understand as a farmer, we don't have to go into definitions. So whatever I would encourage, so what I'm trying to get at is, and I also recently attended a coaching session with the Nelson Nash Institute in Dallas in December, which was one of the things they offered to really hone down, and met some of the superstars of the industry there and got to spend time with them. So is to develop a niche. Now, sometimes we think of niche as really small. It doesn't have to be. It can be big and even broad, but somewhat of a niche. Okay, so that who do you like talking to? Who are you most comfortable with? What is it? Because I'm comfortable with business people. That's just because that's what I've always been exposed to and still am, on both sides of my family. But some people may be more involved with school teachers. So that could be a niche. So I would encourage people to find a niche. And then what I've been working on is a list. And I haven't started this. I'm going to start this spring. Is going to, for example, a farmer and saying, hey, man, what is your biggest concern as a farmer? And just open ended, because I can't define that for them. I can come up with a bullet list of what I think their concerns are, but I need to know what that individual's concerns are. So when it comes to infinite banking, you can start broad, you can start really broad, but I would say relatively quickly, even within the first meeting, it's time to narrow that focus down to what makes most sense for them. And what makes most sense for them is what needs, concerns, risks, because that's what we're really talking about here. Okay, is would they like to see addressed? So after that, what's your biggest concern as a farmer? Plug in teacher, plug in whatever phrase you want to. And then after that, I'm going to say, well, within that concern, what do you think your top 3 challenges are? Oh, my goodness, if we can address one top challenge, we're doing good. But if we can get them to enumerate or state what they think their top three are. And this is not something they have to do research on. All I care about is what's on the top of their mind.
So help me out. Let me jump in and say, prompt me with an example then. Prompt me with an example of, okay, from a conversation that you have had or could have, somebody could say, hey, this is my number one concern. And these are probably the first, 1, 2, 3 things that make that up.
So it's going to sound vague, but this is the way I envision this coming across based on my knowledge and other conversations I've had. So what's your biggest concern as a farmer? And I'm going to stick with that example because it's what I know. So what's your biggest concern as a farmer? I can hear the immediate answer in my mind of staying in business. Okay, staying in business. Well, we can work with that. So if you're worried about staying in business, what are your top 3 challenges? Okay. Well, I think they'll say things like high costs, low commodity prices, and weather. That's kind of the big 3. Now, you'll notice that banking wasn't in there, not as an initial thing. Okay. So that's kind of my goal. But then I have taken that and broken it out into what I think their top 10 challenges are for me in my mind. And then because they'll answer however they want to answer. So quick rundown: input costs, crop prices, environment, financing, government, land, taxes, succession planning, retirement planning, and estate planning. I mean, those are the top 10 in my mind. And you can break that out a whole lot more, which we don't need to go into that kind of detail here. But knowing going into a client, we all face similar things. Let's say it like that. We're not that far apart. They may manifest different, but have a mindset going into your client that you're going to be able to help them. And you're going to help them with what their perceived needs are. And then you'll be able to help them identify needs they may not even know they had. So after that, I've got a list of where you just come in and say, how can the infinite banking concept address your biggest concerns? And then you just pick out of that list what fits their answers. Now, you'll be able to broaden that, but let's don't make it so broad that they can't make a decision. Okay, if you can help me with these 3 things, this is why I need infinite banking. It's not anything other than helping them where they need it most advanced yet acceptable. Well, nobody's ever shown me that before. I didn't even know that was possible. Well, it is, and this is how it will help you.
Right. Yeah, there's a big difference between how much money runs through an individual's or a household's or a farmer's or a business's hands versus what we keep. And it's really hard to run a business in the ground. It's harder to run a business in the ground if they have capital. Now, if they don't have capital, it's hard to stay in business, like you were just saying, of course. So yeah, if we can just help people keep more money by addressing, well, hey, should we have a contingency for if the weather is bad this year and crops don't perform the way that we expect? Or, yeah, what if, and there's no what if, what if costs, continue to rise? That's going to happen. It's inflation. Okay, so what if we could then experience a constant upward growth trend in our private economy, in our personal? Well, doesn't that help us better hedge against inflation and the rising of? Yes, it does. And then all these other things, government. I mean, my goodness, Uncle Sam. Of course, he's got both hands in the pot, right? So, yeah, it's as simple as that. If we could, go ahead. You got a thought. Let's hear yours.
Yeah, and let me say this: the elephant in the room when we're talking to anybody, because we're talking about banking, is what if, speaking of what ifs, what if the banker decides you're not worthy anymore? And they call your note and all of a sudden you're out of financing. I've heard plenty of stories where that's happened to farmers in the middle of the year. They run out of credit. Okay. And so then what do? I heard a story yesterday about a farmer where John Deere Finance came in and just took away all his equipment. And now what's he going to do? So that's the elephant in the room, is the banks can do whatever they want to do. Our goal is to make sure you get to do what you want to do, what suits your life the best, your family the best, your business the best. So to me, that's almost the second conversation is, okay, let's look at some what ifs, not for scary purposes, but let's look at some what ifs. And how are you set up now to handle that? And how would you like to be able to set up to handle that in the future?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that you brought that up. It's so advanced. Here I am just struggling in my own mind of where we're at in this conversation even. It's such an advanced thing, and yet it's so simple. So I'll just use the figure right from the book. Nelson says that the average American is losing 34.5 cents for interest. And that doesn't even bring into everything that you brought to bear by saying, well, what about control? What about independence? What about autonomy? What about the bank being able to do this or the finance company being able to do that? Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's the golden rule, right? He who has the gold makes the rules. And when we're bleeding out that interest, and when we are subject to the terms and conditions and control and providing the collateral that could be pulled right out from under us, when we've abdicated that to somebody else, yeah, what do we do when we're in the middle of a season and it's a hailstorm, or we are in the season and the equipment's pulled out from under us? Yep, I love it. I can't say or feel or communicate strongly enough about the beauty of the financial independence and autonomy of just starting the becoming your own banker process, because it doesn't happen overnight. But when you get a taste of that independence, I don't think there's any stopping you. Mark, tell me this. Where could folks find you to get in touch with you?
I appreciate you asking, Jesse. We named our company Elevated Capital Strategies. And if you're in the farming industry, you understand what elevators are, where you store your grain. Well, we see this as just a place to store your grain, to store your capital, to store your money. So we want to help you elevate that. So we are called Elevated Capital Strategies. I have a website that is not really functional, but it's got contact information on it. We want to add to it, but it's kind of a new venture, elevatedcapitalstrategies.com. It's that simple. My email is mark@elevatedcapitalstrategies.com. And I don't mind you just reaching out by telephone. My direct line is 806-292-6051. And we would love to just have a conversation. We believe education first, implementation second.
Love that. I love that. So thanks for giving me the contact info. Thanks for the conversation. That's something else that I'm remembering now from that video, that conversation with Carlos Lara that the NNI put out just recently, right here at the start of 2025. And that's what he said impressed him was when he called the number on the back of the Becoming Your Own Banker book, Nelson picked up the phone. So I love it that you're putting your number out there. Everybody needs to get in touch with Mark. Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so let's do something. I would love to wrap up this conversation with some rapid fire questions. Are you open for that?
Yep, let's do it.
Love it. Okay. Do you have a favorite recent book, podcast? This could be something for fun. This could be something for personal development. Any recent favorite book, podcast, something like that?
Yeah, I would recommend, because I'm just now getting into it, and it's by Nelson Nash, so you can't go wrong there. Warehouse for Wealth.
That's exactly what I was envisioning and thinking when you were talking about the elevated capital strategies. Yes, I love it, a safe, guaranteed, place for your money. Absolutely, I love it. Okay, cool. What's one of the most impactful things that somebody ever said to you?
That's a good question, because I've heard so many good things over the years, and I alluded to it earlier, and I've heard it for a long time, so I can't quite credit the source, but it really is to think globally and act locally. Okay, because I've tried the other way. I've tried to act globally, okay, but then I ignored local, even in my own family. When I was in the ministry, I could be taking care of everybody else, but forget to take care of my own. Okay. not intentional, but by oversight. And so we have to watch our lives for oversight. So I would really encourage people to think locally. I mean, excuse me, think globally, act locally.
I love that. I remember now that you said that when you were talking about your time in the ministry, and the passage that came to my mind was when Jesus told him, well, start in Jerusalem, then go into all the parts of Judea, and then so yeah, start right there at home. Beautiful. What is a bad habit that you've ever broken?
I've still got a few I need to break.
Don't we all?
But I have a tendency to be a procrastinator or try to fill up time. But I think I've come a long ways there.
So what's a tactical something that you do to mitigate procrastination then?
Oh, uh, in this day and age, put down the phone. You know, got off Facebook. I don't do any social media, things like that, because I'm easily affected by shiny object syndrome. Okay. And so when something catches my eye, I have a tendency to go there. Okay. So I would say more about breaking distractions in my life and staying focused. So it's still a work in progress, but I think I'm getting there.
Love it. I love it. Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset.
That was pretty quick. Okay. Just a little thought. Pretty quick. Beach or mountains?
Mountain.
Even quicker. Okay. What's the most interesting place you ever visited?
Oh, wow. Interesting for a bad reason, but probably the most interesting place. Kathy and I went and did some ministry over in Poland, and we went to Auschwitz and toured that whole German concentration camp facility. And I'm getting chills just talking about it. To realize what people have gone through and yet survived, many of them. And it just, the sense of the overwhelming accomplishment of the human spirit in that place, even in the face of the atrocities, was really impactful to me. So I'd encourage people to get outside their four walls. They don't have to go to Poland necessarily, but get outside your bubble.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something about visiting places that is impactful, and yet what jumped in my mind was what you said, which is, yeah, well, read about Anne Frank, read about Corrie ten Boom, or just even if you just read about people that endured those experiences at those places, it helps our perspective grow, right? And probably our appreciation for a lot of things. I love that. What characteristic do you value most in a person?
Those are good questions. I really value loyalty and forthrightness, because that's something years ago, many years ago, I struggled with, and now that that's something I've overcome, is being, first off, honest with myself. So I value that in people.
I love that. Okay, and then the last one, and I got this one from my boys. Would you rather, if you could have one of these superpowers, would you rather be able to breathe underwater or fly?
Oh, fly.
That was another quick one. Mark, this has been an absolute pleasure for me to have a conversation with you, sir. I do hope that it's the groundwork for us to be able to have, now that we've given folks your origin story, your contact info, and you've just been so generous in sharing, your experience and your willingness. I love that servant heart about you. There was that particular connection for me on the other side of the table from you in the professional setting. I knew I wanted to get to know you better. I appreciate the time that you've given me for that, and I know it's going to be beneficial to everybody else. I'll definitely make sure to put your contact info below, but any parting words from you? I'm very appreciative, sir.
No, the pleasure's been all mine, and that's one of the things I like about Life Journey in general, is just as we help people, we get to know them. So while I may never do an infinite banking concept with you per se, I feel like we're still helping each other as we communicate. So it's been my pleasure, and I really do look forward to more conversations.
Thanks so much, Mark, for being here. Look forward to the next one. Well, that was an absolute pleasure for me to have that conversation with Mark. If you have thoughts, questions, takeaways, I'd love to hear what that is down in the comments section below. Mark's contact info will also be in the show notes. If you'd like to get in touch with me, learn more about how to live and leave a lasting legacy, you can find me at durhamtalents.com. This has been a great pleasure for me. I hope you have a great day. Take care.
I would so appreciate that. Oh my goodness, you're so kind and giving.
All of it. I'm coming to the table just knowing that's how I do things. Because I know by you being giving with your time, anybody that knows me or comes into contact with me will benefit from your story. So I appreciate it.
I'll tell you something that comes to mind, besides just, well, I've got several thoughts, but they're not fully baked. And so it's kind of how I roll. And so I dove in here, but it caused some anxiousness at times early on. And the Lord told me clearly, if you'll take care of people, the money will take care of itself. And so once I got that burden off myself of having to make it happen, things went a lot better. When I started just focusing on taking care of people, the money has taken care of itself. It's been, and that's been the blessing behind it all.
See there, here's why I'm still glad that we're recording. I might cut that little clip out right there because, again, that's just more of genuine Mark, and I think people need to hear that stuff. But I'd love to have you come on to a round table.
Okay, yeah, whatever works for you. I'll be real honest with you, I get insecure and hesitant, like, okay, but I can't, they've got so much more to bring to the round table, but I get over myself pretty quick. Good. Keep getting over yourself in that regard. I'm telling you, and I have to have these conversations with my children, and this is nothing new to you, but our thumbprints are unique, We're made in God's image, all of us, and yet at the same time, there's nobody like Mark Leach. And I would say the same thing to my own son, Jacob's son. There's somebody's had your name before. You're not the first Jacob, but you're the only you. And there really is something valuable when we come together and we share the good news that people can become their own banker. They can have that financial independence and autonomy. So, how far out do you publish though? Let me ask you a quick question.
Yes, sir.
If you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I hear you. Are you thinking about, and I may have already asked you this, becoming a practitioner?
I've thought about it for years and wanted to for years. And the answer why not really is in, your question in asking me about the business. I'm just right in what I know is the beginning of the business, and I haven't seen myself being able to step away from work and home and life really for it. And that sounds awful in a lot of ways, but it's still the answer for me right now.
Oh, it's not awful. Like I said, I have a tendency to struggle with the shiny object syndrome. So it's neat that you can be that disciplined, and stay focused.
Well, thank you. Well, it's important, and yeah, I'm trying to do my very best to do it the blue collar way for now, I guess. So there's not a lack of desire, or ambition, or just a real sense of honor to give credit to Nelson, and I really try and do that. Of course, that this isn't my idea. I didn't come up with it. I'm just somebody who personally benefited from it. Now I help people professionally, albeit in a blue collared way. I'm trying to give honor where honor's due.
I love that, because you're in the crowd that's doing it right. Practitioner or not, you're doing it right. Appreciate it. And I think that's awesome. So YouTube for me is my evergreen venue for reaching out to people. That's the field that I'm sowing my seeds in, right? From the start. And I did it with a real strong legacy in mind, saying, well, hey, if my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren are the only ones that see these videos in perpetuity, great.
I hope that they glean well from my best practices and take this thing to a whole nother level. But I started by personally, messaging and calling folks that I knew. Warm market like you, I'm from a small town, born and raised. So I started by, I recorded a video and I said, hey, this is what I'm doing now. I'm not in travel anymore because I used to be in the travel space. And I said, would you check this video out? Let me know when you have questions or takeaways. Love to hear from you. Started doing that. And, I'd been in the business not having enough clients. I still don't have enough clients. I can do more. And I'm ready to do more. But after 2-3 years, say, of doing that, just directly reaching out to people who every now and then I'd have a new client, come on, someone that I personally knew, and that still happens because I was proactively reaching out to people. I had a partnership come available, kind of like what you have described between you and Becca, with some guys that were great on the front end, like yourself. And I was, knowledgeable and experienced and knew IBC and knew whole life and knew how to build illustrations and all that kind of stuff, knew how to take phone calls, help clients, get an application started, all that kind of stuff. They wanted to work with me. I wanted to work with them also when they reached out. These were guys that I'd known 10 years, great people. Jeremiah Do, Jonah Do, they're the banking bros on social media. And I'm a coach with their company, the Cash Compound, as well. So from the start, I've been a guy out here working independently. I'm in a general agency, which is the Money Multiplier, because that's who I was exposed to infinite banking through, was Brent Kessler from the Money Multiplier. And he just let me go out and do my own thing, which I love and appreciate him for, me to go out and spread IBC the way that I wanted to. But then I partnered up with Jonah and Jadu a couple of years back as well, and we work on cases together also. So that's where I'm at right now. I can take more, personal clients. I can take more cases, and we just keep getting bigger and doing more together here at the Cash Compound as well. I still get really excited, of course. Like this week, I had a guy from Maryland reach out to me, and he saw me on YouTube, and I was so excited because, again, that's somebody who, they didn't know me from the town that I grew up in. They didn't know me from, me being a coach here at the Cash Compound. They didn't know me they saw me on YouTube. And they also saw other people whose, if I said their names, you would know, but he wanted to reach out to me. And for me, that's what I'm going for. That's what I want.